Welcome back to my 2021 year in review. This is the series where I'm going over all of the 100 plus books that I read that were new releases in 2021. Like with previous categories, I'm going to be doing these in reverse order, so I'm starting with my lowest ranked reads, working all the way up to my highest ranked reads. Ain't nobody got time for me to rant about like 20 different books.
Please understand, I hold you in the highest respect.
So I'm going to be trying out rapid reviews again with these and just doing a quick overview of all of the lower ranked titles.
Begin.
Sweet and Bitter Magic is a book that I probably shouldn't have finished. It was so boring, and I don't think there's anything here other than the romance, and the romance isn't even good. Absolutely skip this one, nothing of value. Lost in the Neverwoods is the follow-up to The Cemetery Boys. It's not a related world or anything. This is like a fan fiction about Peter Pan that the author had written beforehand and kind of thought nobody would want to see, and then ended up getting it published. And no, I think they probably shouldn't have published it. It wasn't great. It had some okay things going on at its heart, but things would be getting really intense, like dark, heavy subject matter, and then all of a sudden they're off to a fun little romp at the ice cream parlor, and it was just like very, very disorienting, and I didn't enjoy it. Witch Haven should probably be lower on this list. It's only as high as it is because I really enjoy witchcraft in a magical school, but like this one made me actively mad. I ranted about it afterward. The relationships in particular and setting up multiple love interests so that depending on how plot beats are going, she can just always have somebody that she's after. Didn't like it. Very bad. Down Comes the Night is probably one of the books that we made fun of the most this year. The tagline is the worst thing I've heard. It's just terrible. And after making fun of it enough times, I was like, okay, I should probably check out this book, see if it's actually bad, or hey, maybe it's better than we've been giving it credit for. No, it might have been worse than I was giving it credit for. The villains were laughable. The heroes were honestly kind of laughable. The romance wasn't very good. Tagline's still funny though. Daughter of Sparta is one of 2 YA fantasies that I read this year that takes place in a very Greek setting. This one in particular draws from kind of just all of the myths, just all of them. And you very quickly go through a couple of highlights of different myths. It was so boring. And every time I think I remember a detail from it, I realize, oh no, that's actually a different Greek-inspired book that I read last year. So very unmemorable, very boring. Trying to do like a hate to love romance thing that just didn't work at all. Pass. I was stoked for Beauties and Beasts because 1, wicked cover. 2, I love me some fairy tales and folktales. The Red Riding Hood one, I think it's the first one, was probably the only one that was like, okay, that's pretty decent. I didn't like anything else in this book. I thought it was very try hard, but also bad. If there's another book that I ranted about more than The Prison Healer, I'm not sure what it is. This one definitely gets my ranty vibes going, and it does a couple of things that show promise, and I think that's why it upsets me so much that I rant about it. This one definitely fits into the Kate and Leopold category, where it's just a miserable, terrible protagonist and you have no idea why anyone would like her. And then a really, really wonderful, perfect, can do no wrong hero who the author obviously really loves because she makes him perfect in every way. And it just doesn't make sense at all how they have any sort of relationship or why she's so resistant to this perfect guy who's always doing wonderful things for her. But also, I love like a tournament or a competition of any kind. And this one has trials. So I was super down for it, and the trials are just the worst. The structure and the reasoning for them is awful. The way that they're carried out is awful. The way that the protagonist moves her way through them is awful. I hate everything about the trials, and that was the part I was most looking forward to. God, this book gets under my skin. Malice is an interesting premise with a shaky follow-through. We're supposed to be following Sleeping Beauty, but from the perspective of the villain, and also this is a sapphic retelling. It doesn't get spicy until the last, like, maybe 10%, and then it gets kind of interesting. But everything before that is really quite dull, really quite standard, and just not very fun. I really enjoyed The Hazelwood, and maybe I wouldn't enjoy it as much now because I read it fairly recently after I returned to reading fantasy books. So I was super looking forward to seeing all of the tales that are mentioned in that in their own little anthology. And I think that there's maybe one in here that I kind of liked and stuck with me, but most of them are very forgettable and very samey. They have a lot of similar type protagonists going through similar types of experiences and following a similar arc. And it just wasn't very interesting, wasn't very fun. I pre-ordered it, but I'm going to unhaul it. Cazadora was disappointing because I actually quite liked Lobizona. I thought it was really fun and magical and inventive. I loved the new world and the magical school. One of the major themes is how men and women are treated in society and having this almost institutionalized sexism, the way that they divide the two genders. That's my least favorite part, and that becomes like the whole focus in Cazadora, to the point that it's all politics all the time, and maybe the last 25% is basically just a courtroom scene.
Your politics bore me.
And I was not here for it at all. Very disappointed. This was supposed to be a duology, and I think it got stretched to be a trilogy, and I'm fairly certain that this book in particular is all of the stretch. The Bright and the Pale should definitely be lower on this list, but I love a good god hole, and it brought out the god hole at the end of the book, so everything before the end was really quite boring and regular YA tropes written on the younger scale. But the end with the god hole, I gotta know where it's going, so we'll see how the sequel goes. House of Salt and Sorrows actually surprised me. That was a pretty decent read. One of the better horror books that I've actually read. So I was looking forward to small favors, having these tricksters living in the woods and manipulating people. But there were a couple of things that from the start were going to be kind of tough with me. I do not like a pioneer, small town settler type of setting. And I felt that there wasn't enough supernatural influence in this one. It really just felt like people being mean to each other, and that's not a fun time for me. When Night Breaks is a sequel to Where Dreams Ascend, which I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would. I was definitely compelled and kept flipping through, didn't really want to put the book down. And while it's not really my vibe and it's definitely a lot more romance than I tend to prefer, I thought it was a decent book. The sequel, on the other hand, is just wildly, wildly different. It's a fully different world, fully different characters, fully different themes. It doesn't have any of that dark magician type of magic, so it wasn't at all what I was looking for or expected. Beasts of Prey was fine, but definitely not enough beasts to live up to that title. I recently read a short story that was only like 40 pages long, and it had way more beasts than this whole darn novel that's called Beasts of Prey. It's supposed to be getting a show, so maybe there's a lot more in the sequels that's really compelling and interesting, but at least for this first entry, it was just very meh. My Contrary Mary is cute, it's on the younger side of things, it held my attention, it wasn't as funny as everyone said that the series was going to be, but I didn't really mind it. However, it's not something that I'm interested in really reading any of the other entries for. If you're into this series, it's probably more of the same and you'll still like this one. Library of the Dead is just such a weird little book. Particularly in the slang, the style of writing in this one is going to be very off-putting for most people. I found it kind of charming and unique, and it made me laugh a couple of times. I think that who we're following and the magic system are all things that haven't really been done a lot before, so it feels more original. But the initial entry in the series isn't anything groundbreaking. I'll be curious to see what the next one does. This Poison Heart I was vibing with for like most of it, and then towards the second half of the book, it just fully changed into something else. All of a sudden we're pulling from this Greek mythology type stuff, and I liked the plant magic. The plant magic was really fun. I thought that the relationships we were building were decent, and the main character and their history was very interesting to follow. So I'll be reading the next one, but based on that second half, I'm not sure about this. Six Crimson Cranes UK cover is probably my favorite cover release of the year. I love this cover so much.
Who allowed you to take my breath away?
I really wanted to like the book so that I could justify buying it to have in my collection. So I was really disappointed that it was just okay. Again, this is one I like the original fairy tale that this is based on. It's one that I really gravitated toward as a child. But in this retelling, I didn't get enough of the titular cranes. I think that they really needed to be included more. And there was too much focus on the romance, and I just don't think this is much of a romance tale. Or at least that's not the parts that I really gravitated to. So I would have liked this one better without the romances. It was just fine. I will read the next one, especially because these covers are stunning. But based on the first title alone, it was just okay. I'm probably in the minority opinion of people who read lore, but I actually didn't mind it that much. I thought it was fairly decent. The one thing I will say, however, that it just didn't feel very Greek to me. I think that this takes place in an urban center like New York City, and occasionally they wear like togas to their rituals, but otherwise, if you swapped out all the names of the gods and the names of the heroes, this wouldn't need to be Greek at all. Nothing about it feels Greek, but overall it was alright. I actually didn't mind it. And the cover is real good. All of Us Villains is honestly more fun than it should have been. This is like the Hunger Games, but add magic, and most of the characters are real horny. This isn't high literature. This is definitely more of like reality TV type of enjoyment, but it was a fun little popcorn book, and I'll read the next installment for sure. Dark and Shallow Lies is actually way darker than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I know it says dark in the title, but by the time everything wraps up, like, we get pretty heavy in here. This is like a southern bayou gothic type of book, and I really liked the vibe. I don't necessarily think that the plot or the characters are super strong. They were compelling, but really I was just into the vibes and the way that things were phrased, the kind of atmosphere, the way my skin feels slightly muggy. I thought this was pretty decent. The Devil Makes Three is another one that had like just vibes, except instead of southern gothic bayou, this one is dark academia, and we've got a demon, we've got pages and ink and leather and libraries, and I had a good time. Again, I don't think it's super groundbreaking, but I would definitely recommend this read. I wouldn't recommend this read for everyone, but if you're very into dark academia, it's a pretty decent time, and the vibes are definitely there. The Bronze Beast is the finale in the Gilded Wolf series, and this didn't give me everything that I wanted, but it did tie up the series, so I feel a certain satisfaction in that, but I definitely like the first two books way more. The Nature of Witches has an absolutely stunning naked hardcover. The book itself is pretty good, and even though it's fairly heavy on featuring the romance, I really like the different seasonal elemental type of magics, and I really like the environmental messages. It has a lot of mentions of climate change, but I never felt like it was mentioned in a way that spiked my anxiety, more so just thoughtful and ever present in their world.
So now going into more of the books that I did actually quite enjoy. The first book is Iron Widow, and I heard a lot of really great praise about this one, so I think my expectations were a little bit too high. It was definitely a fun romp, and I knew going in that this was going to be a polyamorous relationship, so I was expecting there to be some romance, and that wasn't really a surprise. I am a little bit tired of feminism and taking down the patriarchy being a major plot point in YA novels. However, this one wasn't done poorly. I just wish there was a little bit more focus on the punchy Pacific Rim type robots. But this definitely had the highest memeing of all of the books on this list, so I appreciate that. The next title is What Big Teeth, and I liked this a lot more than I probably should. It doesn't have a lot of plot.
No plot! No plot!
It doesn't have a lot of characters. It really has a lot of vibes. But I find myself thinking about it quite often and just like going back to that location and kind of reliving my experiences there. Even when I'm thinking about other books, and I'll try to remember what that book was like and be like, oh no, wait. That's the family and the house from What Big Teeth that I'm thinking about again. So this really kind of sunk its teeth into me, so to speak. And I liked it. It's a debut, and I know a lot of people didn't really vibe with it. I think the cover is just really great. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next book that she's going to be putting out. Unfortunately, I don't really think I can say a lot more about it without giving things away, but it's got a gothic feel, it's got a wild family where everyone is kind of like a different creature, and everything just feels very haunted and wrong, and there's really mysterious things going on that the main character herself isn't fully aware of and is trying to figure out. So I had fun with this. Confession time, high school me loved Evanescence. And honestly, current day me still loves Evanescence, just maybe in a slightly different way.
I am that fool.
And if I had been able to read this book as a high schooler, I would have fallen head over heels for it. And that's In the Ravenous Dark. The little emo who still lives inside of me loved this book so much. I really like the magic systems and the world that's built. I like the plot and political machinations that are going on. I think it's really interesting. Again, there's another polyamorous type of relationship going on here, and I thought that was kind of cool. Why is it that YA gets so many of those and adult fantasy doesn't seem to? What's up with that? There are a couple of relationships in this that I think, even like friend relationships, that just started a little bit too quickly, and I didn't feel them as much as I think I was supposed to, but I just was super into the plot and what was happening and how the magic system works, so I really liked it for those aspects, and I actually purchased this one and would definitely read it again, so this was fun for me. If you were ever someone who painted your nails black, I think you should give this one a try. And then there's Into the Heartless Wood, and again, this is kind of romance heavy, and it's not the romance I love it for, though I think that was fairly well done. I love what she did with format. I think it's very interesting just the way that the book was structured and written. But also it's got some kind of fairy tale-ish vibes when you get into the origin story of how this world started that I absolutely adore. I love how everything comes together and understanding how this one element that just seems like a regular old detail is like, oh, it plays into the story this way. And just a couple of little world building things that were sprinkled, especially toward the second half of the book, because we have this huge shift of where the book is located and what kind of is going on in the story. And I just really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good time, and I love the climax and everything that happens. The next book is House of Hollow, which took me by surprise. And I really love like forest magic and plant magic, and I also love kind of like darker, spooky fairy tales, and this blends those two ideas really well together because this is a forest, but it's sour, it's decaying, there are bugs and crinkly dried dead leaves, and a scary big minotaur guy who's like chasing after people to kill them. But we're following along with these three sisters, one of whom has gone missing and the other two are out trying to find her. And something happened to them when they were children. They disappeared for a short time and their parents couldn't find them. And when they came back, they were just different. Their hair color, their eye color, even maybe their teeth were different. And they may or may not have some kind of abilities now. I was honestly surprised by how much I liked this and how much I continued to think about it afterward. And I think this is another one that I'm going to pick up when it comes out in paperback because I surprisingly really enjoyed it. The next book on the list is Flamefall, which is the sequel to Fireborn, and I really enjoy this world. I think it's super well done. She definitely knows what she's talking about. The only thing I always want out of these books is that they have more dragons. If you're going to tell me this is a dragon book and you're going to put the dragon on the cover, I want this to be like dragon, 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 dragon. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a ton of dragons, but it does have really good characters and excellently done politics. We're picking up in a world where a revolution has already happened, and so the kind of like lower classes are now in charge, and they're trying to determine what they think a fair and equal society is, because they know what didn't work before, but also that's kind of their framework that they've always had. So how do you model a new society that's different than that, but also maybe your ideas are always going to kind of come back to that? Seeing how they struggle with different issues that come up, I just think it's very well done and very interesting, especially the two main POVs that we're getting, though we do get an additional POV in Flamefall that I really liked as well. And I can't wait for Fury Song. I think it's going to be just super excellent. Coming in third on this list is Blade of Secrets, and I just had such a fun time with this one. It's so cute and funny. I talked about it in one of my most anticipated releases because the author just has a great sense of humor, and I'm really looking forward to Master of Iron that comes out next. But we're following along with a blacksmith, and she is very socially anxious. She can't really communicate with people almost at all, and so her sister handles all of those types of relationships for her. And she goes and works in the forge and makes all these weapons, but also she can imbue them with magical abilities. Only one day she makes a super powerful weapon and they can't let it fall into the wrong hands. So she sets off on a quest and they kind of have a bodyguard and all these things happen. And it was just really cute. I loved the banter and the relationships. It was a very fun time and super sweet. It's totally YA, but I loved it.
Do you like me? Yes. Definitely. Absolutely.
The number 2 book is Redemptor, and this is the finale for Raybear, which is one of the most original fictions that I read this last year. I really enjoy this world. I think it's super unique. The author is Nigerian American, so I believe that this is a West African influenced book, and it's just unlike other fantasies that I've read in the political structure, the way that they have their relationships. I think that the magics are really interesting and fun, and I like the antagonists in the first book are just so good, and what's set up at the end of that book going into the second book was really good. She stuck the landing with this one, and I just really enjoyed it. I think it's so original and unique, and if you like creative fantasy, you really shouldn't pass this one by. I'm not 100% sure that it really feels like YA, even though it's categorized as that. Maybe it's new adult. I know a lot of people kind of call it YA because we start off with the character as a child and we see her grow into like teenager adulthood, but none of it feels super YA. It doesn't really fall into those tropes or that writing style or age range of, but I really enjoyed this series. And the covers, the UK cover for Raybear, oh my god, it's so gorgeous. I love it so much. And coming in at number 1 is The Last Graduate. This is the sequel to A Deadly Education, which is kind of becoming one of my favorite series, and I know it's not for everyone. I know I didn't fully vibe with it the first time that I read it until I talked about it more after, but I like this series quite a lot. I love the details and the imaginative little elements in this world, especially the school itself, and all of the quirks that it has are super fun for me, and there's a very strong anti-capitalist message. We're following along with somebody who's highly unlikable. She's kind of like a dark mistress bringing death and gloom, but she's real cranky about that because that's not who she wants to be, and she was raised by this very hippy-dippy, loving woman on a literal hippie commune, like in a yurt is how she was raised, and everything goes terribly for her. When she wants to be able to clean her room and get a spell for that, all of the books that get sent to her by the school are just like scouring your enemies with fire, and she's like, I don't need fire to get out a stain on my floor, I just need a cleaning spell. And so she has to put in way more work than everybody else because the universe is determined to make her this dark mistress, and she just wants to live her life, honestly. I have so much fun in this world. I love all of the little details that are included, the different creatures that are invented, the way that the school functions, the powers that everybody has, and how they interact with each other because of what the school kind of forces them to do. And I have to say that everything I was hoping to see in the second book, based on what was set up in the first book, did come to pass. So I was very pleased with that outcome, and based on what we've seen of the cover reveal for the third one and what it's going to be called, I think it's going to continue to go in the direction that I really want for it. And so everything that's been set up has come to pass in a satisfying way, and I really love this series, you guys, and I hope that the third one doesn't let me down this year, but that was my favorite YA fantasy for 2021.
I like it.
So thank you for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite YA fantasy, or would you group YA and adult fantasy together? Personally, I think I read too many of both, so that's why I wanted to be able to give them their own kind of spotlight each. But what was your favorite YA fantasy title of last year? Let me know. Comment down below. And I'll see you guys next time for the adult fantasy titles that I read. Bye!
Oh, hi.